For me, it's the curiosity about the world around me that is my greatest fuel. And that's why I think adventure, leaving comfort zones, is critical for the life of an artist. I mean, some artists produce different work, but I certainly thrive off being curious about other people's passions. You know, if they're passionate about flying and I get to learn about aerodynamics, for me, that inspires work.
My name is Sonia Small here. I'm an artist, art coach, and course creator. When I graduated from the Art Academy, I had learned how to paint and how to draw, but I had no idea how to earn a living with my creativity. I was not prepared for the life as a working artist. This often left me quite frustrated, sometimes on the verge of calling it quits, throwing away my brushes and giving it all up. But I'm so glad I didn't. After many failed attempts and valuable lessons learned, I've discovered ways to turn my creativity into a profession, now giving me the freedom to live the life I love. I created the Help I'm Artist podcast because no matter where you are on your journey, whether you're just starting out or maybe you've been a working artist for a while, you too can take steps to turn your creative passions into a meaningful, sustainable profession. The Help I'm Artist podcast is filled with fresh inspiration, practical tips, and interviews with artists who are experts in their field. If you're a smart artist or one in the making who's looking for new and exciting ways to get your art out of your studio and into the hands and hearts of an audience that's appreciative and willing to pay what it's worth, then you're in the right place. Happy listening.
Coming from a traditional family of lawyers and bankers, South African artist Duncan Stewart never saw himself becoming an artist, even with an insatiable appetite to draw and paint. In this episode, I chat with Duncan about his journey, about his challenges as a working artist, and the lessons he's learned along the way. Welcome, Duncan, to the Help I'm Artist podcast. Great that you can be my guest. We look forward to hearing your story about your artist journey and your adventures. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Sonia. Thank you so much. It's really a great privilege for me to be on your podcast. I've been following you and I know you personally via the internet, which has been a real help, I must say, and a real encouragement to my artist practice and just to myself as an artist. So I'm South African, born and bred, and I'm currently living in a town called Gqeberha, which is the new name for a city called Port Elizabeth on, east coast of the country. And I've been practicing as an artist for, since about 2005. Prior to that, I went and studied art in Italy, in Florence, where I met my beautiful German wife and exported her here to South Africa. And prior to that, I studied graphic design and worked in advertising. So I've always gravitated towards the visual media sort of thing, and now have been, as I said, practicing as an artist full-time in this city.
So when did you know that you wanted to be an artist? Is this something that you knew already as a child, or was it encouraged by your family? Were there teachers that encouraged you to see this as something as a profession or something you could earn your living with?
No one said you could earn your living this way. So it certainly wasn't that. And with all honesty, I don't think I ever saw myself becoming an artist. That was never on the radar. I come from a pretty traditional family of lawyers and bankers, and we don't have any artists in the family. So there was no role model that I could base a career in art on. But what I did have and what I grew up with was an appetite and a desire to draw and to paint. And I just wanted to give myself an opportunity to see why I had those desires. And so although I studied graphic design, initially it had been to study architecture, which in some ways I'm very grateful I never pursued. Desiring those opportunities, I decided I've got to give myself a chance just to see why they're there. And so off to art school in Florence. And as a result of that, more than anything, I thought, wow, this ticks so many boxes for me. It gives me a sense of connecting with people. It gives me a sense of personal expression. And the work that I was able to sell seemed sufficient to sustain me. And so all of those things put together and obviously a family that supported and encouraged me, even though they didn't understand anything about art, as did I not understand. I think it was more a case of, in hindsight, would I have done it? I don't know. Art is a difficult journey, but it's more than ever being true to myself. It's who I am. So I would take it again if I had another chance.
So you went to Florence. Was that for an art course, for some training? What did you do in Italy?
No, I mean, I was working in advertising in Johannesburg full time. And it was actually an interesting conversation. One day, one of the creative directors said to me, he said, "Hey, Duncan," and it was a completely strange conversation, but some of your listeners might appreciate this. He said to me, "Duncan, just look at this ladder that you're climbing. Look what it's leaning against, because that's where you're going to end up." And 22, or however old I was at the time, that was quite a useful perspective, because I was able to step back and say, do I really want to be at the top of this advertising game in 5 or 10 or 20 years? And based on that one passing conversation in the creative studio in Johannesburg, I thought, you know what, I've got to give myself this time just to give 2 years to see why I have this desire to draw and paint. So on the back of that, I researched 3 schools that I was very keen to study at. The one was the Visual School of Arts in New York, and then the Leith Academy in Edinburgh, or the Leith School of Art, and then Lorenzo de Medici in Florence. And so I applied to them, and I just worked out how and what I was going to do it. And it took a lot of courage and a lot of faith. I didn't have the money, so I had to work out how much it required. And then I did things to raise the funds. And that's also maybe an encouragement to some people that are thinking, oh, I just can't afford to get there, or I can't do this. Just apply, find out what you need, and then take bite-sized chunks and get there. So I essentially cycled from Joburg to Cape Town. I got people to sponsor me. I did a whole lot of strange things to raise the money to get there, and then managed to get there. Did the first year in Italy, ran out of money, managed to have an exhibition with all my student work, and was incredibly successful by student standards, sold everything and made enough money to go back for my second year. So
what an amazing story.
Yeah.
So your art, as you were so you went to Italy, you were exposed to all this amazing art. I mean, isn't Italy amazing as far as architecture?
So. Yeah, very inspirational.
And all the art and your work supported you for your second year. So you say courage, not impossible, look at possibilities, break it down into little steps. And you were given this experience of a few years abroad. And that confirmed, I think, your feeling. What did you discover about your urge to paint and draw? Did you get an answer to that why?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer was in very practical terms, in the sense that the work was very well received. The student work, people loved it, and they paid what I thought were very handsome prices for it. So I thought, wow, there's a reason that I've been given this gift. So it's great that I've been able to have this opportunity to just explore it. And I suppose that's what Florence did for me. I mean, it's like, you know, when you play tennis against a better tennis player, you raise your game. If you play against a worse tennis player, your game will suffer. And when you go to Italy, or when you choose your art school, or when you choose the company you keep, I've realized that always aim as high as you can. Your own standard will then automatically be raised. And so that set me on a very positive platform. And then also a sense of self-worth. You know, I've been able to do this. I've been able to achieve this. I've been able to create art in this place. And that also gave me a sense of self-belief in returning back to my environment. So it's almost like those 2 years were sufficient for me, my identity as an artist, to grow, to resist like the family expectations, because no one knew me as an artist. I mean, they always said, oh, Duncan, art is a lovely hobby for the weekend. It's not, get a real job. You know, those I've been sunk by those comments so often. But those 2 years gave me enough time just for the identity of who I believe God created me to be, to take root, that I could resist those let's call them naysayers, or voices that were challenging that new identity, and say, you know what, no, I think this is closer to who I am than I've ever been. And that's been my testimony that I'm on the right road. It's not always easy, and I'm sometimes confronted with things I don't like about myself along the journey, but the journey reveals them, and I'm grateful for that.
And what would you advise someone who maybe doesn't have the opportunity to go to Florence, or maybe is struggling with that same thought of, am I an artist? Well, yes, I know I'm an artist, but my surroundings aren't validating, lack of confidence. What's something that they could do like this year to step into that position? Because it's all about owning the space and, as you were saying, getting confidence and getting that validation because you were selling, to start off that journey.
Actually, I mean, a few minutes ago, not minutes, maybe an hour or so ago, I had a homeless person arrive at my door, and I know him and he's a talented artist. And I was just wondering, how on earth can he go from there to using his gifts and skills in a way that can support and sustain and just release this incredible potential that's inside of him. It's very different for every person. And I've got a huge amount of compassion for those that are struggling to break through. It's true for all artists at all times, so you're not alone. What would I suggest? Wow, what to do? Well, the first thing is to never stop drawing and never stop looking. That you can always have a piece of paper on you and a pen, and I always, and wherever I go, am engaging with the world around me with my pen and pencil. So that's the first thing. In some ways, it's like Shakespeare said, be true to thine own self. Know yourself as an artist, practice it as an artist, get familiar with it. And then you need opportunities and avenues for people to see what you do and what you can create. And I think that's where what you have been so brilliant at, Sonia, is helping artists identify those opportunities and those platforms within their own contexts. And I think that's really key, is to have the relationships, I suppose, more than anything. Is how do you do it? Well, you've got to reach out. You've got to acknowledge, I've got to acknowledge that I need help. I think those relationships, not being afraid, because the danger is to get isolated. I find that very, very destructive for myself personally. Thinking nobody cares, and then you just spiral horribly down. So reaching out to people, building a network of friends and professionals around you that you can bounce ideas off, and just slowly begin to build up some sort of foundation or outlets where you can show what you're made of and what's inside of you.
Great advice, Duncan. Definitely stepping out, finding avenues, connecting with other people. Art is not for the isolated. It can be such a blessing and a gift to yourself, but if you're wanting to go take that step further and actually earn a revenue from it, then definitely have to step out. And it's very scary. I mean, I see with artists too, it's very vulnerable to step out and to share something that's so dear to your heart. But you have been doing it, and I just appreciate your style and just the art that you are sharing. I've never seen it in person. I only, unfortunately, have seen it online. One day I'm going to be seeing it for real life. Because I think it's even more beautiful seeing it in real life. But can you just tell us a little bit about your style? What do you love to paint? A little bit about if you had to give words to your art form, what would that be?
Essentially, I love working across all media. I find all media stimulating and useful for saying different things. So I love to primarily, I suppose, my first natural response is drawing. So I'm a drawer and an observer of life and things around me and things that are happening in culture and ideas and thoughts that are out there in society. And I'm trying to understand them through my perspective and my worldview, and then create artworks in response to that, whether in frustration or excitement or encouragement or whatever it might be. So I'm a drawer first, and then I paint a lot in oil. And then I sculpt in various media, but I've done quite a lot of bronzes and some public artworks in different materials, ceramics, stainless steel, those sort of things. And then what do I like to paint? My subject matter is more figurative than abstract, although I recognize and love abstraction. And so I suppose I'm on a journey of my work becoming less figurative, less cerebral, and more expressive, but without losing some figurative element. One of the artists that I love and admire a lot is Belinda Kooning. And what I like about him is obviously he's Dutch.
Yeah.
I think he started off Dutch. And
started off Dutch and immigrated to the States.
But what I admire about his work, apart from just the visceral energy of those slashes and marks, is that he was painting at a time when, in the States certainly, abstraction was all the rage. And yet he never let go of the figurative aspects within his work. And so he had this hybrid work between figurative and abstraction. And he resisted the pressure from both parties, both the mainstream art critics that wanted him to sign up with the abstracts, artists. And he said, no, then I'm limited by that. And I suppose that's one of the aspects that is shaping the artist I'm becoming, is my resistance to conform to any specific art shape or form or style. And that's both a blessing and a curse. Anything becomes possible then, and you can lose momentum. And I've got to guard against that. It's a blessing in the sense that you continually a child at heart, and anything can become art, and anything can be playful, and there's opportunity in everything and anything. So my work deals with those ideas of culture and context and beauty in a figurative way across multimedia, and it's tending towards abstraction in the days ahead. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I have a good overview of, and I've seen your
basically
work.
Confused artist.
No, well, he has a vision and he's moving forward. No, so if you explain it like that, and I think people just need to head over to your website too to get some context and just to see the work for itself, because you are self-motivated. So you come into your studio on a Monday morning, and then how do you decide what you're going to be making or what you're not going to be making? How do you motivate, and what drives you to make whatever you're making?
There are two things. There are a couple of things that drive and motivate and propel me into the studio, to the easel. The first is fundamentally a deep personal sense of why am I here? What's the point of even making art, really? And so for me, those are the big philosophical questions that every human being has to ask. But essentially, if you wanted to be a truly unique artist, you have to be true to yourself. And what does that mean? Well, you've got to find out who you are. So where do you go to find out who you are? Do you go to Instagram, because that's going to give you just the things you like or dislike? Do you go to social media? Do you go to other people who maybe they don't even know who they are to get their opinion of you? So that fundamental question of knowing who you are is the hard work, I think, of all artists. They've got to have an answer for that question. Why am I here? What's of most value? How do I know what I know? What happens when I die? The answer to those big questions sets up the kind of worldview through which you're going to create art. So if that thing is always shifting and shaking, you're never going to have a unique sort of fingerprint.
If you're ready to build a sustainable, recurring income with your art, but you're tired of figuring everything out by yourself, or you have no idea where to start, then I'm excited to tell you about my brand new membership program, Thrive, that has just opened its doors. Thrive is where artists meet, a place where creative hearts who are equally passionate about their art and motivated to grow their art practice come together to see their art dreams come to life. When you join, you'll have access to an ever-growing library of inspirational, motivational, and educational videos, podcasts, resources, coaching and critique sessions, art expert sessions, monthly Q&As, and so much more. For a limited time only, I'm offering you all access to Thrive, with immediate access to all the modules, the courses, the lessons, the worksheets, the community support, and the Q&A sessions for just €27 per month. Head over to www.soniasmallhere.com/thrive. I look forward to welcoming you to Thrive.
So for me, my worldview is that there is a sovereign creator God, a biblical Christian worldview. And through that lens, he made me for a purpose. And through that purpose, I get to use the talents, the natural abilities and strengths that I have to create work that provides for my family. To answer the question, what sort of drives my art? It's first and foremost to walk in the fullness of my identity. I was made for this. And as I do this, I feel a deep level of fulfillment and contentment as a human being, because I know I'm employing the natural gifts and talents. If you threw me into a surgery in a hospital operating theater, I know that the only useful thing would be the color red, and I'm not good at that red. But in this context, I know I'm made for this. So I feel at peace, a measure of peace that I can't get anywhere else. And then the second and other sort of motivating factors are obviously financial pressure. I have this beautiful family that I want to provide for. And so there's nothing like the end of month and bills to get you working. And something I can just encourage your listeners with, perseverance is an incredibly underrated and important quality. So I've been able to persevere by amazing grace, being able to continue making art for years, for what it'll be going on from, say, 2005. So what's that, about almost 18, 19 years of making art. And what happens is slowly momentum develops. And so when I come into the studio, I often have commissions and clients that are waiting for work, that are involved in the process of the work being made. And so it's almost like a professional practice motivation. It's like you want to be the best artist you can, but you also want to model like an excellent professional practice to them. If they're coming to the studio, the deadlines that are supposed to be met are met, the emails that are supposed to be sent have been sent, the responses on this or questions about this shape or form, those are all dealt with. And so as you persevere, that momentum begins to grow. And it's a wonderful thing, and it's a blessing. And so, being true to myself motivates me. And then also just the professional practice around needing to pay bills, and then obviously the love of creating. Once I've dealt with those early pressures, I love making art. I love finding new ideas and things and when I've got paintings going, I love coming back to the studio. It's exciting for me.
And how do you find the balance? Are you self-representing yourself, Duncan, or do you have representation who are doing the PR and the marketing for you? How does that work in your practice?
Yeah, no, I don't have gallery representation. We'll put it this way. I have relationships with galleries. And I haven't managed that very well. I confess that I've got a lot to learn. And in some ways, it's been a struggle learning how to relate to galleries. And obviously with advancement of social media and online posting and so many different avenues to sell your art and to promote your own art, it's kind of like, well, do I go that route, or do I go with a traditional gallery that takes 50%? And then you're bound by certain sort of ethical relationship, where everything needs to be going back through them. So I've found that difficult, and I've probably, I've learned a lot, burnt my fingers a lot in that process. But I do have a gallery in Cape Town. I've had solo shows they like to have my work down there, and so I work with them. But mostly it's self-representation, and I definitely am looking to expand how I do that with a team, because I can't manage it all on my own.
Yeah, because that's a lot of work, and you only have so many hours. And finding the balance between the making and the marketing.
Yes, making art doesn't make me any money. Marketing art makes all the money.
And then you need art to market. So it's like the chicken and the egg story. It's like you need to find a balance between the two so that you have something that you are, proud of, and that it's done and you can actually market it and then not get stuck with all the marketing. So is there any tips you have to find a balance there?
What comes to mind is consulting with people and reading what works best in your context. So for instance, you've posted material that's been very helpful for me. Do I do like a short-term, once a week pitch on art online, or is it a 6-month strategy? Just strategizing how to even do that. The planning around that is really key. And again, it's not my strong point. And again, I'm so grateful that there's been sufficient momentum that has brought commissions in. So that has sustained and continues to sustain. And I teach twice a week art students. And I've got a small sort of a different income stream selling mini prints called the Creative Collectibles, which is prints of all my works, which is online. And that generates income. But the management of it, yeah, I mean, again, it's just balance. You know, you've got to stay healthy. It's a joy for me to be with my family. They need me. Got to manage the tax and the financial aspects of the business. So I try and allocate 2 days, the first 2 days of the week, a Monday and a Tuesday, to the admin side of my work. And that's also the days that I teach. And then I because I like big blocks of undisturbed time. And then Thursday, Friday is my art, play, create project time.
You have pockets of time that you've allocated so that you, of course, you have a planning. So you do that on the Monday, Tuesday, and the rest of the time you can develop and make the work.
In art.
Yeah, in art. Okay, yeah.
But that's in a perfect world.
Yeah, life happens. And then sometimes it just gets all messed up. But then there's always Monday again. There's always another week. You can start again. And then, Duncan, so you found ways to diversify your creativity. Because I've heard, you have a teaching practice, you have the prints that you're selling, you have your own work, you have commissions, you do the sculptures and the artwork and whatever comes your way. So that diversification has come through time, or have you sort of structured it that way just to make some business sense?
It's definitely been intentional, recognizing that to support my career and then a family, it needs diversification. And so it's been quite natural in the sense that one of the things I'm very passionate about is teaching around creativity. And so I've really leaned into that and tried to grow in my understanding of creativity and where it comes from and why it's so vital and how traditional schooling doesn't value it and what are the consequences of that. And what I've realized is that there's a major shortfall of creativity in the professional workplace. And so I spend as much time as I can going to workshops, connecting with people, doing online courses around creativity. And what that has done for me is it's broadened my exposure in ways that I couldn't have imagined. So I've had clients that have heard podcasts or interviews that I've done who've come to me and then commissioned me from those interviews, or I've done further creativity work with their companies. And so that's been one interesting sort of natural new way of doing, of sort of broadening on my offering, my creative offering. And then, as I mentioned, because my work is so diverse in terms of subject matter, I mean, it ranges from sailing to flowers to abstract to conceptual pieces to paintings to drawings to, it really is broad. What that gives me is a wonderful library of material, and I've catalogued all my work through the years. So when I finished a painting, I make a high-res photograph of it and it's catalogued so that I can make prints of them, unless the person who buys the original has negotiated the copyright to that. So I make these small little prints which are printed onto fine art canvas. I call them the Creative Collectibles. And then those go to all sorts of markets. They're online. I mean, the range that I have online is very small. I haven't even updated it with new works. But essentially, that's also a vehicle for my family because they run that sort of business. The kids have to jump in. They have to learn how to set up the stands. They have to manage the money and the little, the sales and things like that. So although it's earning an income, it's also, I'm using my whole career because we homeschool our children, to sort of impart entrepreneurial skills as best as I can, and responsibility to, they must be all clean and the product must be excellent, and so they've got to handle them with care, which is fraught with challenges.
Yeah, with children. Yeah.
So wherever I can, I try and use this diversification, whether to generate further income or further interest in my work, or use it on an sort of instructional level for, equipping my own kids to be more entrepreneurial.
Wonderful way to use all the aspects of your creativity, Duncan. That's one word that I found on your website too that kept coming back, is that curiosity. That's one of your core values, is just being curious and being open and learning, and that education part of your studio practice too. Is that how you are living your life? It's just being curious and open, and that's where the diversification seems to.
Yeah, I think it was Einstein, or one of those very clever people, who said something along the lines of true intelligence or curiosity is the genius. And in some ways that makes so much sense and becomes so approachable to me, because it's kind of like, yeah, you might not know anything about how mining works, but when a client comes to you and says, would you be interested in doing a body of work for our mining company? Everything inside of me gets thrilled at the prospect of learning about mines and drill bits and massive machinery, and exactly the same for ballet. So for me, it's the curiosity about the world around me that is my greatest fuel. And that's why I think adventure, leaving comfort zones, is critical for the life of an artist. I mean, some artists produce different work, but I certainly thrive of being curious about other people's passions. If they're passionate about flying and I get to learn about aerodynamics, for me, that inspires work, that inspires things. So if you're passionate about guitars and how they're made and the wood that they're made from and the tension, I know I can't play any instrument, but that excites me. That process, your passion for that, and people's passion for the things that they already have put hours in, that I'm very curious about that. And then just by I've always told my kids, curiosity is intelligence for me. If you can remain curious, which means remain teachable, you will just soak in so much information. And so I think that's a great way to squeeze the juice out of life.
That's all for this week. Join me next time for part 2 of Duncan's story. If you want extra support in making, marketing, and building a business around your creativity, then you are welcome to join me and a group of wonderful artists from around the world in Thrive. For a limited time only, I'm offering you all access to Thrive, with immediate access to all the modules, the courses, the lessons, the worksheets, the community support, art expert, and Q&A sessions for just €27 per month. Head over to www.soniasmallhere.com/thrive. And if you never want to miss an episode, then you can subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to this episode, and leave a review, as this will make the podcast more visible and easier for other artists to find it. Thanks for that. Have an amazing week, and I look forward to connecting with you next time. Until then.